My name is Delilah Carter. I'm 35 years old, currently living and working in real estate investment in New York. But the story I'm about to tell you doesn't begin in a high-rise boardroom or with a multi-million-dollar contract. It begins on a June afternoon right at the gates of the mansion where my younger sister was getting married. More than 600 guests in glittering gowns and expensive tuxedos walked under the floral arch, the sound of violins floating through the air like something straight out of a luxury wedding magazine. I was wearing a simple black dress, standing quietly in the late afternoon light. But when I gave my name to the check-in attendant, all I got was a puzzled look. "I'm sorry, your name isn't on the list." I didn't argue, I didn't question it. I simply pulled a cream envelope from my clutch. Inside it, a small golden key and a handwritten card. I placed it on the reception desk and smiled politely. "Please give this to the bride." After the ceremony, they didn't know that just a few hours later, that key would throw the entire wedding into chaos. And it would mark the beginning of the unraveling of the perfect image my family had tried to build for years. Have you ever been erased by your own flesh and blood just because you didn't fit the picture they wanted to paint? If this story touches something in you, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe. I'll tell you what happened after that envelope, and believe me, you won't be able to guess what came next. I stood still in front of the mansion, glowing with warm, golden light, laughter and clinking wine glasses spilling endlessly from the backyard. The scent of jasmine from the garden mingled with expensive perfume drifting through the air. Everything was staged down to the last detail, exactly the kind of celebration my mother had always dreamed of for her perfect daughter. Natalie Carter, 32 years old, creative director at one of the biggest marketing firms on the East Coast, the golden girl of our family. Since high school, she had topped every chart, debate competitions, honor rolls, you name it. And me? I just studied enough to graduate. Not outstanding, not special, never the one anyone mentioned during big family gatherings. I still remember the dinner that year, when Natalie was honored in a nationwide ad campaign, appearing on TV in the white dress Mom had chosen for her. Everyone sat around the table, wine glasses clinking, while my father proudly bragged about our daughter representing the entire U.S. media industry. I sat there staring at a dry piece of chicken breast on my plate when Mom turned to me and asked, "Delilah, have you sold any houses lately?" I didn't look up. I picked at a piece of vegetable and answered quietly, "It's going fine, Mom." As long as you can survive," she sighed. "But you should start thinking about settling down. That wandering job, it's time to stop." I lifted my eyes and caught the pitying look from my aunt, the one who had once thought I'd end up as a preschool teacher. My father stayed silent, pouring more wine for the guests as if he hadn't heard anything. Meanwhile, Natalie was going on and on about her presentation with investors in Midtown. I can still see her hands sketching imaginary charts in the air, her eyes shining, her red lips moving like she had everything under control. She had never faltered, never stayed silent, never gone unheard. I was used to my role, the one sitting quietly, adding another potato to my plate, smiling at the right moments, nodding when expected. I used to wonder if I disappeared from that dinner table, would anyone even notice? When I quit my steady office job to get my real estate license, my mother didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. She said, "You have a finance degree and you're going into that kind of hands-on work? Aren't you ashamed?" Natalie just laughed, raised her glass, and looked at me over the rim. "I just think you're not really the type who should be in a job that requires dealing with clients. But good luck." I didn't react. I didn't explain. None of them knew I stayed up night after night studying property laws, commercial leasing, transfer policies, even urban planning just to nail my very first major deal. They didn't know I once drove 3 hours in the middle of the night to deliver a contract before the deadline. And they certainly didn't know I quietly helped one of Natalie's friends, a startup CEO, out of a legal mess with a lease agreement, and I did it for free. I never told them, because they never asked. All they saw was that I wasn't in the papers, I wasn't on TV, I didn't have my name etched on a Fifth Avenue office door. They didn't know how many clients trusted me, how many calls I turned down just to keep a promise to one client. Natalie could win admiration with a 3-minute pitch. It took me 3 years to build trust with one tough investor. But in my family's eyes, everything she did shone brightly, while I was dim, ordinary, incomprehensible. I remember last year's birthday, when the family threw a big party for Natalie. I stood in the corner holding a glass of water. Mom came over, straightening a napkin on the table, and whispered, "You should smile a bit more, at least so people don't think you're sulking out of jealousy." I looked at her for a long moment, not out of anger, but because in that moment I realized, in her eyes, I had never been allowed to be sad. I wasn't jealous, I just felt pushed aside. Like I was just the understudy, waiting to fill in if the play was missing a minor role. I didn't need fireworks. I didn't need cameras. I just wanted, for once, when I walked into a room, for someone to look at me like I mattered. But that look never came from Mom, never from Dad, and certainly never from Natalie. So when I saw today's guest list, 4 pages long, printed on heavy satin paper, with names handwritten in gold ink and mine was nowhere on it, I wasn't surprised. I just nodded. Everything was playing out exactly as scripted. And maybe that was the moment I decided to rewrite the script. Not with tears, not with begging, but with a small golden key and a plan no one inside that mansion could have imagined. I still keep that invitation in a drawer by my desk. Pearl cream paper, thick stock, embossed floral corners, Natalie Carter and Alexander Dean printed in elegant script, with the words in gold foil beneath. A special day, marking the perfect beginning. I traced the edge of it a few times before tucking it back into the envelope. I hadn't known then that her perfect beginning would start with such a ruthless denial. I arrived at the ceremony on time, in an elegant black dress, light makeup, hair neatly tied. Not flashy, but respectful. I didn't bring much, just a small clutch and the envelope containing the wedding gift I'd spent weeks deciding on. I hadn't come to cause a scene. I came because I was the bride's sister. The mansion gates stood wide open, the reception desk set beneath a canopy of white roses. The guest list was laid out neatly on the table, each name numbered. I smiled as I stepped up. "Hello, Delilah Carter," I said softly. The young woman scrolled through her iPad, fingers sliding down the names, then paused. "Delilah Carter?" She looked up, hesitant. I nodded. "I'm sorry. I don't see your name here." I smiled faintly, thinking it must be a mistake. I pulled up my phone, opened the RSVP email Natalie had sent, and showed her. "Here, confirmation email, sent from Natalie's address 2 months ago." The attendant shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, let me call the event coordinator." While waiting, I stepped aside. Guests kept arriving, some snapping photos, others hugging and greeting each other. Everything passed before me like a performance I didn't belong to. I pressed call on Natalie's number. 3 rings. Then her familiar voice, laughter echoing behind her. "Grace, no, Delilah. What is it? I'm about to head down to the backyard." I tightened my grip on the phone. "They said my name isn't on the list." A pause. Not confusion. Calculation. "Yes, that's right." Her tone slowed. "You're not on the official list anymore." "What?" I asked evenly. She hesitated, then spoke lightly, almost dismissively. "You just don't fit with the people I invited today. There are investors from Asia, the CFO of Medallia, even the wife of a White House trade advisor. I can't risk people being puzzled seeing your name there. You understand, don't you?" I froze. "You sent me an invitation." That was before the final list was set. I thought you'd understand, or at least be gracious. I'm your sister, Natalie. And I also have to protect my husband, the image of the event. No one wants such a stark contrast among the guests. Anyway, I don't have time. Just head home, okay? I'll call later. The line cut before I could say anything more. I stood there, the afternoon sun filtering through the trees, golden streaks reflecting off the mansion windows. No one noticed me. I was just a nameless shadow at my own sister's wedding. The coordinator returned, looking regretful. Miss Carter, I'm truly sorry. I just confirmed you're not on the list. But if you'd like to leave a gift, we can deliver it. I looked at her, then quietly opened my clutch. I pulled out the cream envelope. Inside was the golden key, along with a handwritten note. I had planned to give it during the evening reception, when Natalie was thanking her guests. I'd imagined myself walking up, smiling, sharing a childhood memory, then handing her the very gift she had always dreamed of, a 3-bedroom penthouse on Riverside Drive. I placed the envelope on the table. Please give it to the bride, but only after the ceremony starts. She nodded, asking no questions. I turned and walked past the jasmine trellis, my heels tapping softly against the stone path. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. There was only a quiet, hollow opening in my chest. Not from rejection, but from finally realizing my place in my sister's heart. Not family. Just an inconvenience, a risk to her image, something to be hidden away so her picture looked perfect. I stepped outside, merging with the crowd, hailing cabs, blending into the city, where no one asked if I was on a guest list. No one cared who I was. And in that anonymity, I felt freer than ever. I didn't leave right away after dropping that envelope. I walked along the shaded stone path by the mansion wall. Sounds from inside floated out the orchestra, the clinking glasses, the MC calling the groom's name, all fading behind me like a performance that no longer had anything to do with me. I walked slowly, each step like shedding years of being labeled the incompetent sister, the outsider, the one not worth mentioning. The wind lifted my hair to one side, and with nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to fear, it felt as light as a glass of wine slipping from someone's hand, and no one bothering to pick it up. Inside that envelope the coordinator was holding, there wasn't a check or some empty congratulatory note. Instead, I had placed a copy of the shareholder agreement signed less than a week ago between me and Falconstone Capital Partners, a multi-billion-dollar real estate investment fund headquartered in Chicago, with branches across New York, Dallas, and Miami. I was their newest strategic shareholder, entrusted with overseeing the Northeast portfolio, including luxury residential projects, beachfront resorts, and a chain of commercial developments still under construction. The invitation came after more than a year of quiet work behind the scenes of a string of complex deals, all handled under the legal name of my company. No one in my family or circle of friends knew I was the one behind the resale of a boutique hotel chain in Boston that doubled returns for Korean investors. No one paid attention to the name DC and Associates on the contracts, nor did they know that DC was me. I had done it deliberately. I needed time to build my own value without being dragged down by the skeptical stares of relatives. I didn't want to answer questions like, "How much do you make a year?" or "Has anyone famous ever worked with you?" I needed space to prove my ability not to convince anyone but myself. And then there was something else I left in that envelope, something that, if Natalie opened it in front of the guests, would certainly send a chill through her veins. It was the golden key. A key engraved with the logo of West End Management, a high-end property management company, with a small line of text next to it, Riverside Place, Penthouse A. That penthouse was the very place Natalie once dreamed of owning. I remember clearly the day she dragged me along to tour the project. Back then, she hadn't even been engaged to Alex yet, just considering the long-term potential. As she put it, she joked, but her eyes were full of longing. This is the one where I see myself having my wedding, our 5-year anniversary party, raising kids in the east bedroom with the morning sun streaming in. I said nothing. I only looked out the massive windows, at the stretch of Manhattan sprawled below, the Hudson River glittering in the afternoon light, the city's air drifting in from the balcony, something I never thought was meant for me. Natalie walked through the apartment as if she already owned it, her hand brushing the kitchen counter, tugging lightly at the curtains, turning back to me. The price is too high right now, but once Alex's company goes public in a few years, I'll buy it. This is the dream, don't you see? I nodded. And then I quietly made that dream mine, not for her, but for myself. 6 months later, when I heard the owner was desperate to sell due to a divorce, I reached out. I didn't use an agent. I didn't wear designer clothes or pull up in a luxury car. I brought financial records, offered a 30-day quick payment, and closed the deal in under 2 weeks. $3.5 million, paid with my own money, part from commissions on 4 recent major deals, part from a private fund I had built over 4 years. No one helped me raise that money. No family backing me, no Alex, no parents, no one saying, "Delilah, let us handle it for you." It was just me. I bought that penthouse because I knew it had once been Natalie's dream. And deep down, I thought, maybe one day, if she valued sisterhood enough, I would give it back as a way to mend the fractures of the past. I once pictured tonight, her standing with a glass of champagne, thanking guests, and I walking up to the stage, telling a light-hearted story, handing her the little box with the key inside. She would cry, the hall would fall silent, and for once, just once, I would be the one who gave Natalie the most wonderful gift of all. But she made her choice. She chose to erase my name from the list. She chose to say I didn't belong in her world. She chose image over family. And once she chose to erase me, she also chose to forfeit that gift. That golden key now was only a symbol not of gratitude but of boundaries. A message left unsaid. Some doors, once closed, will never open again. I don't know exactly when Natalie opened the envelope I left. Maybe during the cocktail hour, maybe after the ceremony, when she was sitting on a white sofa in the garden, surrounded by well-wishers and laughter. But from what I later heard from Sarah, the only cousin in the Carter family who he'd ever sincerely congratulated me after each successful deal, that moment was unlike anything our family had ever witnessed. "Cousin," Sarah texted me just after 8 p.m., while I was eating penne arrabbiata at a small Italian place less than 3 blocks from the mansion. "Natalie just opened the wedding gift you left." The whole place went dead silent. I looked up from my pasta, poured myself another sip of red wine, not out of curiosity, but because I could already imagine how it unfolded. "She thought it was cash." Sarah's next message flashed. She even giggled as she opened the envelope. I could see her face in my mind, one hand holding champagne, the other sliding out the card, lips painted rose-brown curling into that practiced smile she'd rehearsed thousands of times in front of the mirror. Natalie always knew when to look surprised, when to tilt her head sweetly, when to feign humility so guests thought she was modest despite the life handed to her. But then, the card slipped onto the table, her expression froze, and she went still for several long seconds like music cut off mid-song. Not because the name on the business card was unfamiliar, but because it was all too familiar. Grace Delilah Carter, strategic shareholder, Falconstone Capital Partners portfolio manager, $6.1 billion. Luxury real estate, U.S. Northeast region. And beneath it, the handwritten line from me, The key to the riverside penthouse you once loved is still inside this envelope. Unfortunately, the recipient chose to erase the sender. Sarah told me a few of Alex's friends exchanged bewildered looks. A silver-haired man in a black tuxedo adjusted his glasses, stepped closer to Natalie, and picked up the card. Delilah Carter? She wasn't invited? Natalie stayed silent. He glanced around, then turned to Alex. This is the partner we just signed the Hudson Yards development with. You didn't invite her? Alex. That, I thought she wasn't involved in the industry. A woman in a purple gown added, I called Delilah last month about the Jersey City project. She's running the entire financial plan for Eastline. Clearly, she's in charge. The whispers spread like fire through silk. Within minutes, at least 5 investors had approached the head table. Some asked questions, some voiced light reproach, others simply looked at Natalie with visible doubt. They didn't have to say much, their eyes alone told her everything was slipping out of her control. Sarah sent one more text with a photo. I think you should see this. I opened it. The frame was tilted, but clear enough. Natalie seated, her hand trembling, eyes fixed on the business card. Alex beside her, scowling, trying to say something but clearly ignored. In the background, I saw Adam Foster, senior partner at Seafront Capital, the same man who'd called me last spring with a proposal for a long-term partnership. I had declined then, not wanting to get involved in any network tied to Alex Dean. I thought I was keeping boundaries, giving Natalie her own space. But apparently, she was the one who broke those boundaries first. The truth may arrive slowly, but when it does, it doesn't knock. The question started spilling out openly. Why wasn't her sister on the guest list? She's a strategic partner. Is there a problem with that? Or did she decline the invitation? No. She was erased. A voice rang out, likely from a guest who couldn't hold back anymore. Then another confirmed it. And finally, a woman from the Texas investor group said bluntly, if you treat family like this, how do you treat partners? Natalie stood, trying to speak, but the admiring gazes were gone. Congratulations turned into whispers, handshakes carried cool detachment. Sarah's final message read, Cousin, I think they just canceled tomorrow's strategy meeting with Alex. You didn't say a word, but you just stripped away the entire polish Natalie spent years painting on. I set my phone down, finished my wine. Under the golden lights, the glass reflected my face calm, neither proud nor angry. Just timely. I hadn't meant to hurt anyone. But truth, revealed or hidden, always carries consequences. And in that moment, Natalie finally faced something she couldn't stage, couldn't excuse, couldn't erase like she had erased my name. My wine glass wasn't even empty before the phone began to buzz. Once. Then, twice. Then, nonstop. The screen lit up and dimmed again, flashing like an emergency signal. I flipped the phone face down, pulled a napkin from under my plate, dabbed the corner of my mouth, then lifted my gaze to the window. Across the street, couples strolled under the golden streetlights, hands entwined, shoes tapping softly on the stone pavement. New York remained tender in its own way, even on a night like this, charged with chaos. I didn't need to look to know who was calling. Natalie, maybe my mother, maybe Alex. Maybe every single one of them each, who once laughed at my work, who once sat silent when I was dismissed as useless right at the family table. I picked up the phone. 63 missed calls. Texts rolled in one after another, each one like a wave crashing against the shore, not strong enough to sweep me away, but sharp enough to sting. Natalie, where are you? Grace, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I didn't know. Please let me explain. It was pressure. I was scared of the image being ruined. I didn't think of the consequences. I hurt you, but please don't humiliate me in front of the investors. I'm about to lose them. I drew in a deep breath. That was the nature of my family when cornered. they swore love. But once the danger passed, everything would return to the same. Then my mother texted, "Delilah, you've gone too far. This is your sister's big day. How could you do that? What were you thinking, sending that envelope?" The whole family is whispering. "You embarrassed us all." Embarrassed. Not one of them asked why my name had been erased. Not one asked if it hurt, showing up only to find I wasn't welcome. All they cared about was image, about what people will think. I quietly opened another message, this one from an unsaved number. "Hello, Miss Carter. This is Anthony Blair from Almer Capital. Do you have time to meet Monday morning? I understand you're currently coordinating part of the Hudson Point portfolio. We'd like to discuss the possibility of a long-term partnership." Right after came an email from a senior partner at Seafront. "Delilah, I didn't expect to encounter you under such circumstances. I'm sorry the wedding didn't reflect the respect you deserve. We'd like to invite you to dinner this weekend to further discuss the merger plans in DC. This time, no one named Natalie will be sitting beside you." I let out a small laugh, set my phone aside. The waiter returned with a friendly smile. "Would you like dessert, ma'am?" I shook my head, then thought for a moment. "Do you have panna cotta?" "Yes, Italian vanilla panna cotta. Very light and refreshing." "Good, I'll have one. And another glass of Chianti." I glanced back at my phone. 73 missed calls. My mother had called 3 times in a row. Natalie was messaging almost every minute. I opened another text from my cousin Sarah. "Cousin, Alex is looking for you. 3 people from Westbridge just canceled the prenuptial agreement he was about to announce." "The reason?" "Because you were missing from the wedding. One of them was an investment advisor who went to school with you. He's furious." I leaned back in my chair. Not out of glee, but because everything was settling back into its rightful place. The truth didn't need trumpets, it always found its way to the surface. Another call flashed on the screen, "Alex." I didn't pick up. Then came a voice message from Natalie. I played it, letting the tiny speaker run beside the panna cotta the waiter had just set down. Her voice trembled. "Sis, I'm sorry. I never thought it would turn out this way. I didn't think you had that kind of influence. I didn't know those 3 investors knew you. I didn't know you were running the Hudson Yards portfolio. I thought you were just selling houses in Brooklyn." A pause. "Sis," they turned on me. They said I was unprofessional. I lost the East Bay contract. Alex was so angry he stormed off to the car alone. Mom is crying. Everyone's looking at me like I just destroyed my husband's entire career. Her voice cracked. "Please call me back. I'm begging you. I need you to fix this. If you meet them again, if you say just a few words in my defense, maybe it'll all be okay." I shut off the speaker. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I knew exactly where those words came from. No one really asked if I was okay. They only called when they needed me to appear like a golden ticket. A tool to restore their reputation. A professional solution. I slipped the phone into my bag, turned to the waiter. "Could you bring me a box for this dessert? I'd like to take it to go." He smiled. "Of course, Miss Carter." I stood, gently folded my napkin, and nodded in thanks. Outside, the streets glowed bright. Life went on. As for me, I was only just beginning to step into my own space, no longer confined by anyone's gaze, no longer boxed in by the Carters, no longer left on the edge of the dinner table counting cold stares. When I left the restaurant, my phone screen was still flashing. 81 missed calls, but my hand no longer shook, and I felt no urgency to answer. 3 days after the wedding, my father called. Not a text, not a voicemail, a direct call at 8 a.m., right when he usually brewed his coffee and read the morning paper delivered to their house in Westchester. "Delilah, tonight at 7, come home. Your mother hasn't been sleeping." Natalie hasn't eaten since that day. You went too far. I sat in my office, morning light pouring through the 41st floor window of Falconstone's headquarters. Why do you think I did something wrong? He stayed silent for a few seconds. I could hear a spoon clinking gently in a cup. Not everyone understands the way you do things, but you need to explain it. Family isn't a place for surprises. I was about to refuse, but then I reconsidered. Not because I owed them an explanation, but because I needed to see, after everything, how much truth they were still holding back. At 7 that evening, I walked into the 3-story wooden house in the suburbs where my parents had lived for over 3 decades. Still the same scent of old oak, the grandfather clock ticking at the entryway. Nothing had changed except the look in everyone's eyes when I walked through the door. My mother sat in the armchair by the window, face taut. Natalie wore a loose gray sweater, hair tied carelessly, dark circles under her eyes replacing the usual pride. Alex stood beside her, arms crossed, not meeting my gaze. The living room was full, my 2 uncles from Boston, Aunt Martha, Uncle Henry, several cousins I hadn't seen since Thanksgiving 3 years ago. No one spoke for the first 10 seconds. Then my father broke the silence. "Sit down, Delilah. We need to talk as a family." I pulled out a chair across from them, sitting straight-backed, neither defensive nor guarded. Natalie spoke first, her voice hoarse but still trying to stay in control. "I want to apologize. I won't deny what happened. I erased your name from the list. I thought if you showed up, people would ask questions about what you do, why you don't have a husband, why you don't have a career like mine. I was afraid it would make me look bad in front of investors." I didn't react. I let her speak. "I thought you wouldn't care," she went on, "because you never seemed to value those things. But I was wrong." My mother cut in, her voice still sharp. "You may not agree with how Natalie handled it, but sending that envelope was humiliating. The whole family's been buzzing about it nonstop." I turned to her. "So, you mean my success is what embarrassed you?" She blinked, briefly unsettled. "No, but you should have chosen another way. More discreet." Alex interjected, his tone curt. "You could have called first. You didn't have to turn our wedding into a stage." I looked at him. "You're right, but I wasn't the one who started it." At that, Aunt Martha unexpectedly spoke up, making everyone turn. She set her teacup down, her voice deeper and steadier than anyone else's. "Does anyone here remember when the family real estate firm nearly went bankrupt 5 years ago?" Silence. "That has nothing to do with tonight," my father said. "It does," Martha replied, "because the one who saved the company wasn't Natalie, and it wasn't Alex. It was Delilah." The room froze. I looked at her, surprised. I had never told her. "What are you talking about?" my mother asked, frowning. Martha nodded toward me. "She won't say it. But back then, when your firm was drowning in that loan for the Yonkers complex, Delilah was the one who negotiated with the bank to restructure the contract. She used her license as an independent broker, represented the buyer, stood as intermediary, and helped sell off half the project in just 2 months. That cash flow is what kept you afloat. Without her, you would have lost the company." My father stared at me. You were behind that?" I nodded, calm. I didn't think it needed to be mentioned. "What mattered then was that you kept the business." "Why? Didn't you say anything?" my mother asked, almost whispering. "Because I knew, even if I did, you would have brushed it off as luck." The room fell silent. Natalie lowered her head. Her hands clenched the sleeves of her sweater, eyes averted. I rose to my feet. "I came because Dad asked. Now I think I've said enough." "Delilah," my father called after me, but I turned back, speaking gently. "I didn't come for recognition. I don't need an apology. I just want you all to know sometimes the one you think is weakest is the one who kept this family from falling apart. No one said another word as I walked out. The night air brushed my shoulders, cool and strangely light. After all these years, I finally left that house without carrying a single ounce of shame. The next morning, I sat in a law office at 9 a.m. New York was brisk and gray, but inside me was a rare weightlessness. The riverside penthouse, the place Natalie once called her dream home, now lay in the thick file folder before me. Beside me sat my attorney, who had stood by me through countless difficult deals, and across the table was Maria Santos, director of Homeward Haven, an organization helping homeless veterans reintegrate into society. She wore a light brown suit, round glasses, petite frame, but her eyes were bright. When I signed the last page, she couldn't hold back her emotion. "Miss Carter, I need to ask, to be sure. You truly want to donate the entire apartment, with no conditions, no honorary ownership?" I nodded, carefully closing the folder. "Yes, I have no intention of using that apartment for myself. If it can become a shelter, even a new beginning for those who once stood on the front lines defending this country, then it's worth more than any ceremony. Mrs. Santos stood, clasping my hands in both of hers. You've just changed the lives of dozens of people, maybe even more." A few hours later, the press release went out. I hadn't planned to announce it widely, but because of the property's value and the organization's media partners, the news spread quickly. Investment director Delilah Carter donates $3.5 million penthouse to Veterans Support Group. The key of gratitude. Top real estate shareholder transfers luxury apartment to build reintegration center. Not long after, the press reached out. I got a call from a reporter at the New York Times, an interview request from Forbes Women, and an email from a producer at a morning television show. I declined almost all of them. I didn't want my image tied to a sensational story. But there was one interview I agreed to on a local TV station, the same one that had once produced a feature on the housing program for single mothers in the Bronx, a project I had helped fund 2 years earlier. In that short conversation, when asked what had motivated me to take such an action, I simply said, "We all have dream homes. But for some people, just having a roof over their head through the winter is enough to start over." I didn't donate that property because I wanted praise. I did it because I've lived in luxury spaces while feeling empty inside. Meanwhile, there are people who, with just a small, peaceful room, can rebuild an entire life. At the end of the interview, they asked if I had a message for those living in doubt about their self-worth. I quietly answered, "Don't let anyone else decide your place in your own story." That very afternoon, I received an email from Mrs. Santos. "Miss Carter, today we welcome the first 4 veterans into the Riverside apartment. Among them was a man who had lived in a truck for 2 years. He cried when he opened the door. He said he never imagined the day would come when he could step into a place like this, especially one given to him by a complete stranger." I read that line over and over, not to feel proud, but to keep myself grounded. That apartment had once symbolized someone else's dream, but when I stepped out of that dream, I turned it into something real, a space for people who needed it more than I ever did. A few days later, a photo appeared on an online news site. It showed a silver-haired man in a worn coat holding his little daughter on the balcony of the apartment. Behind them was the large glass window overlooking the Hudson River, the late afternoon light spilling across the room. Beneath the photo, a short caption read, "An apartment once, the luxury dream of one person, is now the true beginning for many." I didn't send that photo to anyone. I didn't post it online. I simply printed it, framed it in plain wood, and placed it in my office. So every time I walked past contracts worth hundreds of millions, investment plans, and binders thick as bricks, I would remember what I was working for. When Natalie learned that I had donated the apartment, she didn't text me. But Sarah later told me she sat in her office for a long time, saying nothing. She wasn't angry, she wasn't furious. She was simply silent. I don't think she felt hurt because she lost a gift. I think it was because, for the first time, she couldn't control a narrative about me. She couldn't edit it, couldn't erase it, couldn't pretend to understand and then brush it aside. Now, my image no longer lived in my mother's words, in the disapproving glances of relatives, or in Natalie's half-hearted quotes. It was in the media, on the desks of major investors, and most importantly, in the hearts of people I had never met but had somehow helped to stand tall again. And it all started with a small envelope left at a reception desk, on the day my sister believed I had nothing to contribute to her success story. I hadn't planned to follow what happened to my sister after the wedding. Everything I needed to do, I had done. The gift was given, the choice was made, and the truth no longer rested in my hands. But some news finds you even when you don't go looking. Sarah called me 2 weeks after the wedding. Her voice was cautious, tinged with worry. "Did you read the news this morning?" I was sitting in a conference room reviewing a housing development plan for seniors in Connecticut. I tilted my head, signaled my assistant to pause the presentation, and stepped into the hallway. "No, what happened?" Sarah exhaled heavily. "Two main investors just pulled out of Seed Frame." I didn't react immediately. Seed Frame was Alex's startup, Natalie's husband's company specializing in AI for healthcare, once hailed in the press as the East Coast's rising unicorn. "What did they say?" I asked. "No official statement, but multiple sources say the reason was Natalie's behavior at the wedding, specifically the way she treated you. One of those investors, Mr. Braddock, had worked with you on the North Jersey project." I leaned against the wall, gazing through the hallway window at the Hudson River gleaming in the afternoon light. "I'm not happy about that, Sarah. I know, but I think you need to be prepared." "Prepared for what?" "Media outlets are revisiting everything Natalie ever said publicly about you online. The times she mocked you as the sibling stuck selling small houses, or that interview last year in Lifestyle Weekly, where she said, 'Having a sister freelancing pushes me to maintain professionalism in a real corporate.'" I nodded softly, though she couldn't see me. "Cousin, back then no one cared. But now, with your name showing up on top investor lists, with the press praising the apartment donation as a model of financial leadership, those words of hers are starting to backfire." That afternoon, I received a series of alerts from my firm's communications team. They had combed through everything publicly linked to me. A brief report landed in my inbox. Among the screenshots was a LinkedIn post from over a year ago. Under Natalie's photo at a marketing conference, the caption read, "While some in the family are still wandering with small private projects, I feel proud that I work daily with global corporations." Back then, I had skimmed it and moved on. I was used to it. Her digs at me never stopped. But now analysis pieces began to appear. The decline of Natalie Dean's image, when success can't hide attitude. Behind the perfect veneer, the hidden story of two sisters in New York real estate. One financial journalist wrote in a weekend newsletter, "In a world where reputation is crafted click by click, erasing a sibling from a wedding is no longer just a family matter. Especially when that sibling manages an investment portfolio 5 times the size of your husband's company." Alex's company seemed caught in a media storm they hadn't anticipated. Within 3 days, 2 senior advisors resigned from the board. A string of canceled meetings hit their investor relations schedule. A week later, Natalie deleted all posts about family from her accounts. She also shut off comments. But the internet doesn't erase easily. Sarah texted me again, her tone heavier this time. "I think she's under serious pressure. Mom is demanding she apologize publicly. Alex is tense, arguing with his father. I'm not defending Natalie, but seeing her like a shadow of herself, it hurts. I stayed silent for a few seconds. I understand, but I'm not the one who created that shadow. That weekend, I happened to run into Mr. Braddock at a private East Coast investors' dinner. An older man, calm, once an officer in the military before moving into finance. We shook hands, exchanged a few pleasantries, then he leaned closer and said quietly, "Miss Carter, I couldn't believe I was once invited to an event where your name was erased from the list." When I asked Natalie, she said, "My sister has no role in the investment world." Luckily, I double-checked. I smiled, not smugly, not defensively. Sometimes silence is the best way to let people show who they really are. He nodded. I've always valued those who do more and talk less. That night, when I returned to the new Park Avenue apartment I was renting while waiting for my permanent move, I switched on the lights, slipped off my coat, and looked out the wide glass window. The city glowed bright, like a river that never stopped flowing. I placed my hand on my desk, where the framed photo of the veteran holding his daughter still Saturday. Their eyes, their smiles reminded me I had chosen right. Somewhere out there, Natalie was wrestling with the consequences of her own making. As for me, I had finally stepped out of her shadow to stand in my own light, no one guiding my hand, no one's permission needed, no invitation required. My new title was announced on a Monday morning in mid-September. The meeting took place in the top-floor conference room of the Glass headquarters, with wide windows overlooking all of Manhattan bathed in soft sunlight. Mr. Graham, the fund's founder, was already waiting when I walked in. "Delilah," he smiled, eyes glinting behind silver frames. "We'd like you to serve as vice president, overseeing the fund's real estate portfolio. At present, it's nearing $6 billion, but I believe, in your hands, it won't stop there." I didn't answer immediately, not from hesitation, but because, in that moment, I remembered my parents. I remembered the dinners where they stared at me across a cold table, skeptical eyes when I spoke of investment plans and strategies they dismissed as pipe dreams. I remembered Natalie, sitting in the wedding hall while my name was struck off, camera flashes circling her gown like the world belonged to her. I looked straight into Mr. Graham's eyes and nodded. "I'm ready." 6 weeks later, the first feature ran in Forbes. The headline read, "Delilah Carter, from being erased at a wedding to holding the reins of billions in real estate." The article made waves. Not because I exposed family drama, but because it told the story of a woman who worked quietly, was dismissed, and rose on her own. The media began calling me with phrases I once thought belonged to others. The mind-reshaping suburban investment, the strategic face of the new generation of female leaders, the symbol of quiet strength. But for me, the change wasn't in headlines. It was in the people I met, the stories behind every project. At one gathering of strategic partners, I was introduced to Daniel Whitmore, a renowned architect in the Northeast, chosen to design a veteran housing project in Vermont. When we shook hands, his gaze was unusual, not eager, not awkward, simply steady, as if he wanted to listen even before I spoke. "You're the one who transferred the mansion to the Veterans Housing Trust?" Daniel asked as we sat across from each other at a cafe near Union Square. I smiled lightly. "News travels fast. Good things usually travel faster than scandals," he shrugged. "Especially when they come from someone who doesn't boast." We talked for hours that day, not about projects, but about people. Daniel told me about his father, once a firefighter, and how he became an architect not out of a passion for shapes and structures, but because he wanted to build decent spaces for those life had beaten down. "I've always believed that the spaces we live in can heal," he said, his eyes thoughtful. "But I never imagined that a single decision to transfer a property could make me believe in the goodness of finance." I stayed quiet for a while, not out of shyness, but because his words made me realize that without meaning to, I had touched something greater than achievement. We met again in project meetings, in work dinners, and slowly, in late afternoons with no reason at all. I had once thought, after everything with my family and with Natalie, that I could never trust leaning on anyone. But Daniel never asked too much. He simply walked beside me, quietly, like a row of trees offering shade without shutting out the light. One early winter evening, I invited him to the 39th floor apartment I had just moved into. It was small, neat, overlooking the river. I cooked a simple dinner pasta and salad. As we ate, soft classical music played in the background. Daniel lifted his glass, tilting his head toward me. I used to think people in finance were cold, detached from reality. And now? I asked. Now I think some people don't need to shout to prove they're changing the world. I didn't answer. I just placed my hand gently over his. No words needed. We understood each other in what was left unsaid. One day, at a press conference at the fund's headquarters, a journalist asked me, "Delilah, what helped you stay calm and strong after being denied by your own family?" I looked straight into the camera lens, then replied slowly, "I'm not trying to get revenge on anyone. I just want to live true to my values. If I had to be erased from one event, only to step into a role that shapes the future of thousands of people, then I think I chose right." The conference ended with applause, no staging required. I stepped into the hallway, noon sunlight slanting through the glass panels. Daniel stood there, waiting, holding a small box. "New office opening, you need a gift," he smiled. I opened it. It was a miniature model of the Veterans Housing Project, with red-tiled roofs, rows of maple trees, and a wooden plaque carved with the words, "Delilah's Hope." I stood still for a moment. "I don't need people to know who I am," I said softly. "As long as this place exists." Daniel's eyes grew misty. "You exist, and you're changing more lives than you realize." I smiled. Not a victorious smile, but the quiet smile of someone once erased from a list only to become the one shaping the list herself. That afternoon, the Manhattan sky turned gray, as if coated in dust. Raindrops slid across the office windows, leaving blurred streaks in the glow of tower lights. I was near my desk, reviewing the restructuring plan for a housing complex in New Jersey, when there was a soft knock at the door. Martha, my assistant, peeked in, looking uneasy. "Delilah, there's a woman at reception. She says she's your sister." I froze for a second, not from surprise, but because that name had long drifted far from my mind. I nodded. "Send her up." Less than 3 minutes later, Natalie appeared frail, thinner than before. The golden hair, once perfectly styled, now hung messy, her clothes wrinkled, makeup smeared, as if trying to hide sleepless nights. She stood still for a moment, her eyes meeting mine. No arrogance left, no greeting. I gestured to the chair. "Sit." Natalie sat down, hands clasped tightly, as if holding on to the last fragment of trust she once thought she'd never need. "I don't know where to start," she said hoarsely. "Alex, he left. The company project lost most of its funding. I sold the car, drained my savings, moved in temporarily with an old friend. The press won't leave me alone." I stayed silent. None of that gave me satisfaction. It only made clearer the truth. Vanity, built on lies and stepping on others, always collapses. "Why did you come here today?" I asked evenly, neither reproachful nor softened. Natalie lowered her head, her eyes welling. "I came to apologize. I've been jealous of you my whole life. When we were kids, you were smarter. As adults, you were independent, building your career on your own. I was praised, spoiled, but never felt enough." I listened quietly. A year ago, I might have longed for those words, but today, in this room, I rebuilt brick by brick for myself. I no longer needed that recognition. I'm sorry about the wedding, about striking your name out on purpose. I thought if you weren't there, I'd be the center. But in the end, no one talked about my dress. They only mentioned the one who wasn't on the invitation yet made the whole room look at itself. I drew a slow breath, my gaze on the rain-streaked glass before turning back to her. Natalie, I said softly, we chose different roads. You followed the spotlight, I chose the shadows, to build with both hands what would last. You lost the dream house, but I found myself. Natalie broke down crying, no longer the kind of tears meant to draw pity or sympathy. These were the tears of someone finally facing the mirror, seeing what she had done and lost. I rose and opened the door. I wish you the strength to keep walking, I said, not bitterly, not coldly. She didn't answer, just nodded slowly, eyes red, and stepped into the hallway as if relieved of part of her burden. I returned to my desk, staring at the rain outside. My phone rang. It was a familiar number from Valor Home Foundation, the charity where I had transferred the $3.5 million estate. Hello, Delilah. The young woman's voice was bright with energy. We just finished our quarterly report. The housing project at your former estate has now sheltered 26 homeless veterans. Some are learning carpentry and repair work. Others have started training programs to re-enter the workforce. I leaned back, eyes drifting toward the hazy skyline. Peace filled me. Thank you, she added. You didn't just give them shelter. You gave them hope. After the call, I set the phone down, walked to the wide window. Below, Manhattan buzzed on. People rushing across streets, car horns echoing through the city that never sleeps. I glanced at the cooling cup of tea on my desk, then at the long wooden table in the Darter News conference room, the place where I had once been cut from another table, but now was the one deciding who sat with me. I didn't need anyone to hand me a seat. I had built my own table. A table without blinding lights but with respect, without expensive wine but with honesty. A table where no one was erased, no one diminished, only people creating lasting value together. A gentle breeze slipped through the window crack, carrying the scent of late-season rain and a calm yet vibrant stillness. I smiled, not because I had proven anything, but because I no longer needed to. My story may not mirror yours, but if you've ever been struck from something that should have been yours, if you've ever stood outside your own life just because someone else thought they had the right to choose, then maybe you understand that feeling better than anyone. I'm not telling this to complain or stir resentment. I'm telling it to say this: you don't need to wait for a seat at someone else's table. If you're not given the place you deserve, stand up and build your own, a table where you're heard, respected, and no one has the right to erase your name. What do you think of the way I chose to end this story? Would you forgive if someone who erased your name came back to apologize? Or would you do something else? I truly want to hear your thoughts. And if you care about real stories about family wounds that seem small but cut deep, about journeys of reclaiming yourself through hardship, follow this channel. There are many more stories waiting to be told, and one day, you may even find your own in them.